So we've got some AI news for you guys. Meta is now getting into the space of AI generated music. And I'm going to go into what this new model is, how it got trained this time on licensed copyrighted music, but they did pay for it. And in fact, some of you guys watching this video trained this AI model through Pond 5 and Shutterstock. We'll talk about that. But I'm also going to play you some of their samples, and I'm going to sort of give you an overview of how this model feels like a big step up from the music LM model we were hearing from Google just a few weeks ago. And again, the point of this is not to try to intimidate or scare you guys or to just throw, rain on any of our parades. I just want us to keep our eyes open to this stuff. I want us to keep our ears open to this stuff and really hear what these models are capable of doing. I think you'll find at the end of this video that things are progressing, and they're progressing fairly quickly, even though these are still purely research-based. They're not commercial products. They're not intended to be used in any commercial sense to replace stock music or production music. But this technology is brewing out there. It's definitely bubbling up to the surface. And so we need to make sure that we are listening to it, keeping our finger on it, and making sure that if we need to adjust, change our strategy for what we need to do in our sync licensing careers and maybe our stock licensing careers, we can start making those moves now, because we certainly don't want to be sort of caught up in something that's this powerful and not know if we have any power later on down the road. And you do have a lot of power, some things you can do to basically try to create a much more human touch to your music. So it's the Music Gen AI that Meta, formerly Facebook, has released. It was trained on 20,000 hours of licensed music. And what was really interesting about this, as I was digging into this particular article, which is linked below, is they said that we use 20,000 hours of licensed music to train Music Gen. Specifically, we rely on an internal data set of 10,000 high quality music tracks. So they had their own internal sound library of some sort, but they also use Shutterstock and Pond 5. So some of you guys have been getting some of that data set income into your Pond 5 or Shutterstock, soon Audio Jungle, accounts. And this is where it's going. Okay. So this was basically that conversation I had with Pond 5, asking them, is this a possibility? And essentially, in so many words, they were saying, yes, these AI models can certainly train off this music and learn how to generate completely new music, learning from all of the content that we have in our catalog. So this is definitely already happening. And the fact that this has been released fairly soon after a lot of those models were trained is, I think, telling for how quick this stuff is going to evolve. This is what I saw a few months ago when I really dipped my toes into the waters of this stuff. And I thought, this stuff is going to evolve a lot faster than most of us think. Now, what I want to do right now is I'm going to show you some of their examples, and you're going to hear for yourself. They actually, on this site, I'll also give you a link below. You guys can take a look at this. This is basically sort of like a white paper explaining and showing off kind of what this does. It does two things. One is that it is a text to music model where you can basically just put in text, a description of what you want. So this is the first one we'll listen to. Pop dance track with catchy melodies, tropical percussion and upbeat rhythms, perfect for the beach. So this is the first example that it'll show you. And what I'm going to do is compare it to the Music LM model. They also have Riff Fusion and Muse AI. Both of these, I'll play them for this first example, but you'll hear basically the quality differences, and it's a big drop off in terms of what these two models can do. Music LM is still pretty high up there, but you'll see that the sample rate, I'm not sure if I got exactly and found out what the sample rate increased to, but I think you can hear the sample rate increase dramatically with this new model. So let's go ahead and take a listen to what this Meta version of AI generated music can pull off with this text input. Probably go to the beginning there. Now, I know some of you guys watching and listening to that for the first time are going to go, still not impressed. I know a lot of you guys are still going to feel that way. But I want to ask you an honest question. If somebody was to put together a YouTube video and they had a very limited budget, like it was just basically somebody's side hobby, they weren't really trying to make a business out of it, but they needed music to go in the background and they happened to be on vacation in the Caribbean, do you think they'd use a track like this, or would they go pay $25 or $50 to Pond 5 or Shutterstock or our subscription service and pay a little bit higher premium to put that in their YouTube channel. I think they would use this. I think this is already good enough for a lot of people that just need some filler vibe music in their kind of low budget production. And I think this pretty much gets the job done. That's how quickly this stuff evolved. That's my 2 cents. It's not the best pop tropical song I've ever heard. I don't think this is a track that could go viral with an artist. I don't think this is a super high quality track. That's not the point of this. We don't have to have that debate. I agree with you guys on that. I'm saying, is it good enough? Right? That's really where you guys should be thinking about this stuff. Not so much as like, well, my music's more dynamic than that, and mine's this and that. Probably true for a lot of you guys, but do consumers in the world who are just looking for cheap, easy, fast music care that your music is so much more dynamic and human touched and all that kind of stuff? Do they really care, or are they really just thinking about the bottom line? I think they're probably just thinking about the bottom line, and if the music is good enough, and I think this one is pretty good. I think that's actually not bad. Comparing it to Music LM, let's take a listen to what they were doing with that same text input. So one thing you can hear right away is the sample quality is obviously much lower, right? And it had some cool vocal effects or whatever, but you just could feel that was just much more of a compressed, low quality, not a great sounding track that probably would make it into even a low budget YouTube video or a podcast or something like that. Just for fun, let's take a listen to what Refusion, which uses a different sort of process, what it came up with that text input. I don't think we need to get through the rest of it. You can tell, not quite pulling that one off, not doing something that's really useful. Muse AI. Again, it got the beat right, but the quality is low. It just doesn't feel like it's really capturing the essence of what this is. And I think one of the main reasons is, and this is what I've talked about in some of my videos, is it's about using that high quality copyrighted data. That's really what's separating, I'm thinking, Music Gen from these other three, is they were one of the first that paid to go listen and study off of fairly high quality, at least in Shutterstock and Pond 5 music. So that's basically, I think, one of the main reasons why you're hearing a much better output, and definitely getting something closer to this, because they probably studied hundreds of tracks that were sort of in this tropical pop era, and it can essentially do something similar. So you can go through, click through these if you want to. I just want to show you one more. Essentially, well, there's basically two more things I want to show you, but one is it does have this feature where you can essentially just input a melody, or basically like a reference track, and it'll sort of consume that, study it, and then spit out a version of it based on your instructions. So here's an example of an input melody that was put into the model. Very recognizable Phantom of the Opera kind of a thing going on there, right? So if you just inputted that into the model and then typed in, I want you to make that a 90s rock song with electric guitar and heavy drums, here's what it can do. Pretty interesting, right? Now if you want to do an 80s driving pop song, same melody. Now, I think what's interesting about that, even though it's not really an impressive output, the fact that it can do that, I'm impressed with. And I think what would be really cool about this actually came up during our Sync Up event, is imagine you had an app like this. When you turned in your music to a library, you turned in, let's say, just a standard rock tune, but you put it into like a meta Music Gen model and said, turn this into a hip hop version. And it took your track, compressed it, combined it, studied it, and then spit out a cohesive hip-hop version of the same chords, melodies, progressions, swapped out the instruments, made it sound much more believable for a different genre. Potentially a lot more placements for us. So this is not necessarily just a threat to us. This is essentially could be an amazing tool for us that can allow us to have not just alt mixes, but like alt genres. You can literally turn in a track and you can spit it into any other potentially type of genre that might be useful for a client. So I think that's really powerful. Now, a big breakthrough that I think we need to pay attention to here is that this music gen model can actually spit out music a lot longer than we previously thought was possible with AI music. Before, it was like, yeah, we thought it could be like 20 seconds, 30 seconds. But basically what this model is doing is it's using a fixed 30-second window to create the music, and then they slide the window by chunks of 10 seconds. So they keep the last 20 seconds that were generated as its context. So essentially it's moving like this. It takes the last 20 seconds and goes study from that, make something cohesive that kind of matches what we were doing before, and it just keeps moving forward that way. So it doesn't have to, generate the entire piece of music at once. It just kind of generates 30 seconds and then studies what it just did to create new music. Now, of course, there's going to be limitations with that, but there's some interesting things that it can do. This was actually a track that I just posted in Sync Academy, and letting everybody there know, if you're doing orchestral trailer music, something like that, and your music doesn't sound as dynamic and as interesting or as just compelling as this. Now, this isn't obviously the greatest thing I've ever heard, but I'll be honest, this is better than some of the tracks I have reviewed in Pro Feedback and in the Syndicate over the years that I've been reviewing a lot of members' tracks. This is a little bit better than some members' tracks. Not everybody, and those of you that are obviously really, really talented and really honing your skills and becoming high-quality orchestral producers, this is probably nowhere near you yet. But I do want to say that the sort of days of coming to this industry with kind of average, sort of okay orchestral music, this model is kind of proving those days are done. Like, you've got to really be excellent, like really the top of your game if you really want to compete. So let's just take a listen to a little bit of this. We won't play the full 2 minutes. You guys can do that on your own time if you want to. Got it. So as you can see, not amazing, not the best thing you've probably ever heard in your life. But what I have already noticed, though, this is what I've noticed. So the first time I made some videos about this, showing you guys the Google Music LM, especially the very beginning, I was getting scoffs. Ugh, terrible. Oh my God. That's the worst thing I've ever heard. Oh my God. I can't even, it's unlistenable. And I agreed with a lot of you guys on those comments that some of the music that Google Music LM was popping out was pitiful. It was just not even really music. It was more noise that you could kind of squeeze into a box calling it music. And when I started posting these tracks and sharing this kind of stuff with the community, the notes and the feedback I was getting were a little bit different. They weren't saying those, and they weren't saying this was awful, terrible, couldn't even listen to it. Now I'm hearing things like, still pretty robotic, not human-like enough, doesn't feel compelling, very, very low quality, feels stiff, right? Those are the things I'm hearing now. I'm not hearing the scoffs as much, though. I'm not getting the complete dismissal that this is not even something we should be worried about. We've actually stepped up our dismissals to, it's there in a way, but no, that's not really close to us. And this is what I think is going to be happening basically month to month as we get more and more into this technology, is that those feedbacks, those comments and that feedback that I'm receiving, we're going to be stepping it up more and more and more, where it's going to be like, I don't know what the next step up is going to be, where it's going to be like, yeah, it's pretty good, but there was one instrument that felt like it was a little bit out of place, so nobody's going to license that, right? I don't know if you noticed in that first one, it even had a transitional effect. That was one of these new things I hadn't been hearing in a lot of these generational models. So it actually has swooshes and impacts and that kind of thing already kind of built into the system. So this is what I think is happening. Again, I'm not trying to scare you guys. I'm not trying to just overwhelm you with fear that all hope is lost for the future. Absolutely not. But you gotta take this stuff seriously. You can't just be dismissing this and just every single time something improves, you go, well, we kind of, I think this is what a lot of people are doing, is we have cognitive bias, of course. Is it cognitive dissonance? We are looking for reasons why this is not a threat, right? We're always wanting to think that this is not something that could potentially disrupt us. So we're always going to our brains will always want to pick out the thing that's not that threatening, not that impressive, and just focus on that and sort of ignore the bigger picture of a wave is coming at you, okay? So we need to make sure that we are not being ignorant on this stuff. We are actually caring about this. We're actually showing some consideration, and that we're looking for opportunities. Like I said before, switching up the genres of the model like this, I see an opportunity there. It's not all bad news. It's something that we can actually use to our benefit as long as we are looking for these opportunities and looking for a way to allow this to empower us. So this is basically just, we're still in phase one, essentially. I still don't see any AI models training off of production music libraries, but basically those are the ones that are supplying the TV film shows for the most part. Stock licensings, not necessarily, they can do some of that work, but for the most part, they're doing kind of more the internet, YouTube, Instagram, influencers level of music licensing, smaller projects, that kind of a thing. But I think the reason why a lot of production music libraries are not approaching them, one, they're probably not as big of catalogs. You're talking about, I don't know if I mentioned that before, but there were 400,000 tracks that they study off of between Pond 5 and Shutterstock. So it's a lot of tracks, okay? Most production music libraries don't have, 10,000 or 20,000 tracks, okay? So there's just not that much for them to sort of offer an AI model. So the high quality, A-level production music is still somewhat insulated from these AI models coming and training. One, for the reason that they are obviously not as high in numbers. It's not going to be as useful for an AI model. They need a lot of data to get good. But secondly, the human component, okay? So if you're working with a production music library and there's a human being on the other end of that relationship, they're going to give pause before they allow an AI model to come into their catalog. Even like a big company like Universal, they've got relationships with the composers and the libraries and the catalogs and the labels that they essentially work with. So they're going to have some really honest and hopefully transparent conversations with all their suppliers before they decide to open up their content to some AI models, right? So if you've got personalized human to human contact and relationships in this business, you'll at least get that call before a move like this is made with your music, okay? This is definitely something we talked about at Sync Up, but why those library CEOs, they're in person, were really valuable for you guys to be able to connect with and talk to them and ask them these kind of direct questions, because they're the ones that are definitely going to get in touch with you and talk to you about these important issues. And if they're not yet, you should be talking to them. Send them this video if you want to and let them know, hey, this is kind of something coming up in our industry. It's sort of hitting the stock music licensing side first, but next up is production music. I think that's sort of the next phase where a lot of these companies and these models are going to want to essentially try to get into and start studying some higher quality music. But we can use this technology as well, right? We can learn how to create our own AI generative models that takes our music, swaps it up, creates new music, and credits us and pays us for what it sort of spits out. So we shouldn't be sitting here on the sidelines just being freaked out about this, or worse, burying our heads in the sand and pretending like it's not going to ever catch up with us. We should really wrap our hands around this. We could really embrace it and start thinking about it. So again, openness and curiosity, that's what these videos and that's what all this stuff is really about. At least that's my point of view. So what do you guys think? Was this a step up? Was the quality much better? Are you taking this now more seriously after seeing this video? Are you still dismissing it, thinking it's still not that impressive? It's not something you should really worry about? I want to know where you guys are at. Leave your comment below.